I didn't think of him as a person with enemies. It was just shocking news.
This case appears to be a homicide.
Dan Markel was relentlessly positive, a very devoted father.
He's got blood all over his head.
Something like this is just unfathomable.
Why would somebody kill a law professor in the driveway of his house?
Immediately, the theorizing began.
I myself said I'd like to kill Danny Markel.
Investigators wonder if this divorce has taken a deadly turn.
That question of why isn't going to go away.
We have not apprehended everyone that had a role in this homicide.
There is a sense in which we're still waiting for another shoe to drop.
There's one motive: money.
That's some sick stuff.
The Dan Markel story is intriguing to People magazine and to our readers because it's the story of a beautiful family that seemingly had it all, and suddenly that family was shattered. Tallahassee, Florida is a college town. That's where about 40,000 students every year attend Florida State University. Among the many people that are employed by Florida State University is 41-year-old criminal law professor Dan Markel.
Danny Markel is a much beloved professor and a widely respected academic in the field.
He was extremely accomplished. He had achieved certain things in our profession that most people don't achieve at this stage.
I first met Dan Markel more than 20 years ago. We worked together on the college newspaper, the Harvard Crimson. He was one of the brightest people on a campus filled with bright people.
He was an incredibly high-energy guy. I mean, he was somebody who came into academia and really hit the ground running.
I ended up having an office next door to his. The word extrovert in the dictionary has Dan's picture next to it. He'd be popping his head in whenever we were both in our offices. I could expect to hear what was the latest in Dan's life.
His students talk about him being a hard but fair professor. Not only is he very instructive in a classroom setting, he also has students over to the house where he makes them home-cooked meals. They debate law and talk about a lot of different things.
Dan just loved people, and he wanted to make those connections between people.
In the summer of 2014, Dan Markel is thriving as a professor, and he's fallen in love with a woman he recently started dating. 2 years earlier, he was devastated to realize his 6-year marriage was over.
Though he was very surprised by the divorce, he remains a very dedicated and loving father to the couple's 2 sons, Benjamin and Lincoln. One of his associates says that he was really in awe of his kids, that he really believed that they were magical, and every moment he had with them he cherished.
Dan was a really passionate guy. He was intensely excited about his work. He was equally passionate and committed about his friends and his family. He was just the most enthusiastic father I think I've ever met in my life.
Friday, July 18th, 2014, is a typical summer day for Dan Markel. On his way home, he speaks to a friend about a new school for his children.
He pulls into his garage and he's continuing to talk on the phone when he sees a car pull up behind him. He tells his friend on the phone that there's an unusual car that's just pulled into my driveway behind me.
The next thing the person on the line heard was some kind of noise and some kind of muffled sound, and then the conversation ended.
A neighbor hears gunshots and looks out to see a green Prius pulling out of Dan Markel's driveway. Another neighbor comes across the street to Dan's house, sees Dan sitting in the car in his garage, the window smashed out, and Dan slumped over the wheel.
Dan's alive, even though he can't respond to any of the questions that the neighbor is asking him. And the neighbor calls 911.
911. Getting sent an ambulance in a hurry.
Tell me exactly what happened.
The garage door was up. His driver's side window is shattered, and he's got blood all over his head. He's not responding to me. He's still alive. He's moving.
Dan is gravely wounded and rushed to the hospital. while police try to piece together what has happened there.
Investigators question the neighbor who first heard the gunshots.
The neighbor provides their first and most important clue. A Prius, green in color, pulling out of Dan's driveway.
It's a good lead, but police need more information. Green Priuses are very common.
At the hospital, doctors determine that Dan has been shot twice in the head at close range.
Dan is fighting for his life and is rushed into surgery where doctors do everything they can to try to save him.
Very quickly, we learned what happened, and it was deeply shocking and devastating.
I didn't think of him as a person with enemies. He was a very mild and gentle person, so it was just shocking news.
Immediately, the theorizing began about what could have possibly happened.
I mean, why would somebody shoot a law professor in the driveway of his house?
There weren't many signs that this was a robbery. Nothing was taken.
It could have been a disgruntled student or an angry colleague. Dan was somebody who was politically engaged, and he was somebody who didn't run away from a good argument. This could sometimes rub some people the wrong way.
Mr. Markell, if you knew of him or learned about him, he was a pretty remarkable person. And the fact that he had been gunned down in his driveway just left a lot of questions.
The immediate reaction was to investigate what was going on in Mr. Markell's life to try to identify anyone who might have a motive to do this kind of thing. And that included both investigating his professional life as well as his personal life.
I heard it was rabbis from New Jersey being the people who came down and did this.
Just days earlier, Dan provided legal assistance to a rabbi implicated in a scandal involving Jewish divorces.
Rabbis who were essentially kidnapping men who would not give their wives Jewish divorces. Some people wondered, could it have been something related to that?
With little to go on, detectives find Dan's ex-wife, Wendy Adelson.
Wendy's having lunch when police show up. They take her to the police station and tell her that her ex-husband has been gravely wounded by a shooting in his garage.
There was a shooting at your ex-husband's home. Daniel, has been taken to the hospital.
Oh my God!
Wendy was terrified, first for the boys and then for herself. She did not know what had happened, whether she was at risk.
But as investigators are talking to Wendy, she says some things that make them wonder if this divorce has taken a deadly turn.
I understand why I'm a suspect. I understand why you would think that I would do this.
Florida state law professor and loving father Dan Markell has been shot twice in the head in his garage in what looks to be an attempted execution.
He's rushed to the hospital, but after 12 hours, he succumbs to his injuries. Police now realize they have a homicide investigation on their hands.
I got the news and I just couldn't even, it was impossible to compute.
When I found out about Dan's murder, I was shocked, I was horrified, I was saddened. He was in the prime of his life, in the prime of his career. It was just hard to believe.
It appears from what we've seen so far that someone intentionally hurt Danny. He's not going to survive.
Wendy is devastated. Not only have her two boys lost their father, but here's a man who she once loved, who has now been horribly executed in his driveway.
I just don't understand. How could this happen?
Detectives ask Wendy about Dan's family.
They all live in Canada. His family's all in Canada.
Okay.
They're gonna think I did it. I was complaining about him at the lunch.
For detectives, Wendy's statements trigger suspicion.
I need to ask you, was your divorce simply the fact that you all just didn't get along anymore, or was it just the fact that he was belligerent to you?
He never hurt me physically, but he was emotionally abusive.
Okay.
He told everyone around the community that I was mentally ill because only a crazy person would leave him.
Nearly a decade earlier, Dan Markell and Wendy Adelson appeared to be a picture-perfect couple.
The two of them met while Wendy was still in law school at the University of Miami at a mixer at a legal conference.
They're both very driven and very focused, and it really just seems like a great match.
I remember when they were dating and how excited Dan was. He knew this was the person he was going to marry.
Beyond their shared professional ambitions, Wendy and Dan balanced each other personally.
Wendy was always really good at making him laugh at himself. They had a really nice dynamic in that regard.
In the spring of 2006, Dan and Wendy marry.
The marriage, from what I could tell, was what you would probably describe as like a fairy tale marriage at the beginning. Very prominent young folks who had law degrees, had very promising futures.
And not too long afterwards, they have 2 boys that they love.
Dan was very interested in the life of domesticity and having kids and picket fence and the whole thing.
His office door was always plastered with the drawings his 2 boys had made.
By all appearances, the young family of 4 is living the American dream.
Police take a closer look at Dan and Wendy's divorce.
Wendy served him divorce papers in a most unusual manner. Dan had been away at a legal conference, and he came home to find furniture missing and the divorce papers laid out on the bed.
I remember Dan saying things seem pretty bad at home. Like, I think she just is not into me anymore. She doesn't love me anymore. She doesn't love me. I don't think she wants this to work.
Over time, it became obvious that Dan's path and Wendy's path were no longer in sync, and she began to feel that he didn't view her as an equal, that he felt he was intellectually superior to her.
Dan was stunned and surprised. She cleaned out a house, took the boys, and wouldn't tell him where they were. He was deeply distressed about that. He loved his kids and didn't like the idea of not being able to see them or know where they were.
Dan was deeply sad, and he wanted the marriage to work. He wrote lengthy, loving letters explaining all the ways in which he feels he had wronged her over the years. He was willing to do anything it took to get her back.
The divorce between Wendy and Dan was acrimonious, but they knew that both of them had to be good parents to the boys that they both loved.
Custody of the children was an ongoing issue. Wendy had requested the court to allow her to relocate the children to South Florida, where her family was located.
There was still a lot of fighting going on about a lot of different things, but Dan was finally happy again in a real way and wasn't just spending time thinking about the divorce. He was really excited about his new relationship.
Investigators test Wendy for gunpowder residue, but quickly confirm her alibi during the time of the murder and eliminate her as a suspect.
My ex-husband caused me a lot of grief. I would never do something like that.
Police ask Wendy if she has any idea who might want to hurt Dan. And Wendy gives them one name, Jeffrey Lacoste.
Jeffrey Lacoste is also a law professor at Florida State. Just a week earlier, he was shocked when Wendy ended their relationship.
Tell me about Jeff.
So he's been my boyfriend. We've been dating since end of October.
Jeffrey Lacoste was very vocal around others about his dislike of Dan and his belief that Dan had been mistreating Wendy and looking down on her.
Police bring Jeffrey Lacoste in, and what shocks them is that he immediately admits that he should be a suspect.
I'm the paranoid ex-boyfriend. I'm surprised you guys didn't call me earlier, though, because I probably said 100 times in public that I like to kick his ass, because he kept, really making Wendy suffer.
Wendy became very close to Lacoste. She began to use him as a shoulder to cry on about her heartache over the marriage, about Danny, about the kids.
Wendy was afraid of Danny. Wendy would almost have a panic attack in front of Danny. Just a total control freak, emotionally abusive, controlled the finances, and I don't know if he hit her or not. He was pretty mean to her.
Lacoste became very protective of Wendy.
I don't know if you met Wendy?
Not personally.
No, very charismatic. I mean, once you date this girl, you just do anything for her. I'm not the only man that's been under her thumb in that way. I mean, she really has this charisma, this sexuality, and so, you throw...
Police know that the volatile nature of love and love gone wrong can be a very common motive for murder. So this makes Lacoste an obvious person of interest.
But no, I would never. I'm a professor. I'm not going to do anything like that. No.
Police learn that Lacoste was out of town during the murder, and he's cleared as a suspect. But he offers investigators some additional information.
Lacoste is quick to provide investigators with additional suspects in Dan's murder.
He tells them, "You need to look at the Adelson family. There's something weird about them."
The family hated Danny. Charlie hated Danny. Her parents hated Danny.
Jeffrey further tells police that the level of hate that the Adelsons have for Dan is volatile and it's extreme. They hate Dan with a passion.
I would be investigating Charlie Adelson. If you're looking at somebody, don't miss him.
Charlie Adelson is Wendy's older brother. They're close and part of the tight-knit Adelson family.
Harvey Adelson is Wendy's father, and he runs a very successful dental practice in South Florida. Wendy's brother Charlie is also on the staff of the Adelson Institute, and Wendy's mother, Donna, works there as well.
Harvey and Donna are very aware of how unhappy Wendy is and how much she has suffered in her relationship and her subsequent divorce.
Detectives bring friends of the former couple in for questioning and ask them about the relationship between Wendy's family and Dan.
Her parents, they hate Danny.
They hated Danny, really.
They hate Danny. I wouldn't put it past her father or even her brother to do something. Her parents, they hate Danny.
They hated Danny, really.
They hate Danny.
Investigators take a closer look at the ongoing custody dispute between Dan and Wendy and discover it's more complicated than they first realized.
The more we learn about Wendy and Dan's breakup in court proceedings, the more it becomes obvious that her parents have a prominent role in the unfolding drama.
The Adelsons so badly want Wendy and the boys to move to South Florida that at some point, her mother, Donna, has written emails coming up with a scheme that maybe if they paid Dan $1 million, he would agree to let the boys and Wendy move to South Florida. Dan is a very involved, dedicated dad, and he was not about to let the boys that he adored live so far away from him. And at that time, any kind of friendly agreement that they had had in the divorce went away. The gloves were off for Dan. That was something that was just not going to happen.
Wendy asked the judge overseeing the divorce if she could take their children and go back to South Florida where her family lived. The judge denied that, leaving Wendy and the kids effectively stuck in Tallahassee.
Dan responded with a motion of his own, one that included Wendy's mother, Donna.
He filed a document requesting the court to basically say that Grandma couldn't have contact with the kids anymore unless it was supervised.
The boys had come home and they had told their father, Grandma hates you, Grandma thinks you're stupid. Dan felt that this was detrimental to them and he didn't want Donna to spend any time one-on-one with them.
The motion that Dan made was never ruled upon. Dan was murdered before there could even be a hearing.
At this point in the investigation, there are no witnesses, no weapon. Police have nothing to go on except suspicions that Wendy's family might have a role.
But investigators need more than a messy divorce and meddling in-laws to make a case for murder. Their best and only lead is a sighting of a green Prius leaving Dan's driveway just after the shooting.
One of the law enforcement investigators said, why don't we gather footage that is created when buses drive around with cameras attached to them and see if we can find the Prius that was a vehicle of interest in the case.
Detectives examine hundreds of hours of surveillance video from the day of Dan Markel's murder, and their hard work pays off.
What's incredible about the bus footage is that they can see the green Prius following Dan Markel on the morning that he's killed.
The Prius is first spotted from a bus, heading in the direction of Dan's home. Then, just before 11 a.m., it's spotted again from another bus, driving in the opposite direction of Dan's home, aligning perfectly with the time of the shooting.
The surveillance footage is a huge break for investigators. but the footage is so grainy that it's difficult for them to identify anyone in the car or to make out the license plate number.
They do, however, notice that there is a toll transponder on the vehicle relating to travel up and down the turnpike to Tallahassee.
This is notable. There are not many toll roads around Tallahassee.
Investigators analyze toll records and isolate one transponder belonging to a green Prius. It's registered to a rental agency in Miami. They subpoena the rental agreement and find one name on the contract: Luis Rivera. Another man, listed as a brother, turns out to be Sigfredo Garcia.
After months of no leads and it looking as if the case is going cold, the case breaks wide open.
The rental agreement for the car implicated Garcia and Rivera.
Rivera has a lengthy criminal record. He is based out of Miami and a well-known member of the Latin Kings gang.
Mr. Rivera knew Mr. Garcia through growing up in South Florida.
Sigfredo Garcia doesn't have quite the same criminal history as Luis Rivera, but he has been arrested for various offenses over the years.
The rental agreement also reveals cell phone numbers. Now, detectives are able to trace the men's movements and discover Garcia and Rivera traveled from Miami to Tallahassee on Thursday, July 17th, 2014.
They arrived around midnight the night before the homicide.
Cell phone activity reveals the two men spent the evening at a local roadside motel.
Allegedly, the next morning, Garcia and Rivera wake up and put their plan for murder into motion. Surveillance cameras capture Danny Markel going to the gym and the Prius pulling into the parking lot right behind him.
As Dan works out, the Prius changes parking spots in what appears to be an effort to avoid detection.
Just after 10:30 a.m., Dan is seen leaving the gym, and as he drives out of the parking lot, the green Prius with Garcia and Rivera is seen following him.
Roughly 15 minutes after pulling out of the gym parking lot, a city bus picks up Markel's car, heading in the direction of his home.
Seconds later, the same bus camera picks up the green Prius. Dan Markel is shot just before 11 a.m. Another bus camera shows the green Prius heading in the opposite direction just minutes after.
The cell phone records and surveillance video give police enough evidence to move in on their suspects.
It's nearly 2 years after Dan Markel's murder, and police finally make their arrests.
Last week, Mr. Sigfredo Garcia was arrested and charged with first-degree murder.
Luis Rivera is also charged with first-degree murder. Even though police have the alleged shooters in custody, they have no clue what motivated them to drive hundreds of miles and murder Dan Markel.
After almost 2 years of investigative efforts, a warrant was obtained for Professor Markel's murder.
The Tallahassee police have finally arrested two men in the murder of Dan Markel, Sigfredo Garcia and Luis Rivera. But the question remains, why did they do it? What is their connection to Dan?
Investigators are puzzled because they don't have any evidence that tells them why two criminals from Miami would drive 14 hours round trip to execute a seemingly innocent law professor.
Detectives continue to look for clues and discover Garcia and Rivera made some big purchases after the murder, including motorcycles and a vehicle.
They begin to theorize that the men had one motive: money.
Police continue to review Garcia and Rivera's cell phone records from around the time of the murder, and one phone number makes a frequent appearance.
They determined that Sigfredo Garcia was in contact with a woman by the name of Catherine Magbanua.
Ms. Magbanua is a resident in South Florida. She is the mother of Sigfredo Garcia's children.
Then investigators make an astounding discovery.
Catherine Magbanua was connected to the family of Wendy Adelson, Dan's ex-wife. Catherine dated Charlie Adelson around the time of the murder.
Obviously, she's what everyone's called the conduit. If you remove her from the situation, is there anything that ties Rivera and Garcia to Markel? I don't think so.
Police take into greater consideration an interview they conducted months after the murder with Jeffrey Lacasse, Wendy's ex-boyfriend.
When I first talked to Investigator Hale, I was shattered. A lot of the stuff I told him, I don't know how it came across. He seemed to think I was a disgruntled ex-boyfriend that got my heart broken, and that's why I was upset.
That's when he began to recollect some disturbing conversations he had with Wendy.
But she told me that Charlie had looked into having Danny killed in the summer of 2013. She meant it dead serious. Said it would cost about $15,000. I would be investigating Charlie Adelson. He's friends with people on both sides of the tracks. Charlie is street smart.
Lacasse's new statements cast Wendy's previous interview in a new light.
My ex-husband caused me a lot of grief. I would never do something like this.
One statement about her brother Charlie is particularly chilling.
He knew Danny treated me badly, and it was always this joke. He said, I looked into hiring a hitman, and it was cheaper to get you this TV, so instead I got you this TV. Such a horrible thing to say.
With circumstantial evidence mounting against the Adelsons, investigators start monitoring the family's communications.
Law enforcement procured what's called a T3, which is an authorization to go up on a live wire where they're listening to phone conversations as they're being made.
You someplace you could talk to me?
You can talk to me now.
On both Charlie Adelson's phone as well as Catherine Magbanua's phone. For 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, for some weeks, they were in a room listening.
Investigators also review Magbanua's bank records and notice a stark difference in her deposits before and after Dan Markel's murder.
There was a spike in cash deposits in Catherine Magbanua's bank account around the time of the homicide.
Over the next year or so, she made various cash deposits to her bank accounts that totaled somewhere in excess of $40,000 or $50,000.
Police also discover that around September 2014, Catherine begins receiving bi-weekly paychecks from the Adelson Dental Institute in the amount of $407.58.
The issue was that we were live surveilling her at her residence and listening to her phone calls. We were not able to see her ever physically going to that business or performing any type of service over the telephone that could be in exchange for the paychecks.
These checks are signed by Wendy's mother, Donna, and the theory becomes that the Adelson family have paid Katie to be the go-between between Sigfredo Garcia and Luis Rivera to carry out the murder of Dan Markel.
Authorities also learn that Magbanua has received gifts from the family in the months since Dan's murder.
They notice that she is now driving a Lexus, previously registered to Harvey Adelson, Wendy's father.
She was, in a sense, getting a free ride from the Adelsons.
In addition to money, Magbanua also received plastic surgery.
She acquired breast implants from a well-known South Florida doctor.
It was paid for in cash. There's no cash coming out of her bank account, so somebody paid in cash for her to have breast augmentation shortly after the homicide.
With a pile of evidence mounting, investigators pull cell phone records for Katie dating back to the summer of 2014 when Danny was murdered.
As they look through her cell phone records, they're able to see this crazy timeline that's going on in the minutes after Dan Markel was killed.
At 11:22 a.m., 20 minutes after Dan Markel's neighbor finds him shot in his garage and calls 911, Charlie Adelson calls Magbanua and his mother, Donna.
At this point, investigators know that Donna was furious at Danny Markel for not allowing Wendy to relocate to South Florida.
We also know that it's her signatures that are on the checks given to Magbanua.
All of this information potentially connecting them is compelling but circumstantial. They need more.
Investigators hope to catch the Adelson family making incriminating statements. They launch an undercover operation designed to trigger communications about the murder.
An operative made contact with Donna Adelson outside of her residence on the street. Law enforcement want to generate some discussion of the homicide between these parties.
An undercover officer posing as a stranger approaches Donna.
Excuse me, Mrs. Adelson? How you doing? I just want to give you this.
He tells her, "I know what happened," and gives her a piece of paper demanding a payment of $5,000 and a number to call.
My brother, he helped your family with this problem you guys had up north. He's going through some rough times, and we wanted to make sure that he's taken care of.
Donna is seen on video surveillance taking the note from the undercover operative. She doesn't look at it. She puts it in her purse, and she leaves the area.
She doesn't respond, but she immediately gets on the telephone to Charlie and explains what has just happened.
I got some paperwork hand-delivered to me.
You're being sued?
No, that's what I thought it was.
It's very clear she doesn't want to talk about it on the phone.
Charlie and his mother, Donna, they're keeping their conversations very cryptic.
IRS, or does it involve me or other people?
Well, probably the two of us. So you probably have a general idea what I'm talking about.
Charlie then calls Catherine, and Catherine and Charlie meet in a restaurant where their conversation is overheard by yet another undercover officer.
I got a call from a friend of mine saying that you reached out.
There are some statements that were able to be heard from the recordings, including Charlie making statements to Katie that if this person that had contacted his mother and tried to extort her was a gangbanger who's coming to threaten my mother, you need to take care of it. And if you need to kill him, kill him.
It's very loud in the restaurant, and so they can't make out everything that's going on in the conversation. But at the very end, the police hear Charlie tell Catherine, "If you can't take care of this, I will find someone who will."
Despite what appears to be damning conversation, investigators don't feel that they have enough evidence to arrest the Adelsons. But with cell phone and bank records connecting Magbanoa to the suspected hitmen, investigators arrest her for the murder of Dan Markel.
Rivera and Garcia initially pled not guilty. But after Catherine Magbanoa is arrested, police go back to them and give them the opportunity to make a deal and tell them exactly what occurred before it's too late.
Once Katie is in custody, Luis Rivera flips. He confesses his role, pleads guilty, and begins to turn on the other two.
Rivera indicated that Catherine Magbanoa was the person who set this up. The motive for the hit was to allow Wendy Adelson to move with her children to South Florida.
Asking me why you want to kill this guy, because the lady wants her 2 kids back. She wants full custody of them kids.
According to Luis Rivera in his interview to the police, he said that Katie is at the center of everything.
And it's all because of Katie, man. It's all her.
Police dig through cell phone records and discover that Garcia and Rivera had made another trip to Tallahassee roughly a month before Dan's murder.
Rivera describes his first trip to investigators. He said as they were driving in front of Markel's house, they saw Wendy outside the house.
I asked Garcia, man, what's up with this lady? Why is she looking so much? He's like, oh, that's that lady. That's Wendy. I seen her walk a little bit further from her house, get on the phone.
You drove by, you saw her, you asked him, he says that's Wendy. She's making sure that we're gonna do this or whatever.
Okay, yo, everything all right with this lady? And she's like, yeah, everything's straight, don't worry about it. Just make sure you get that done.
Garcia and Rivera leave Tallahassee without completing the hit, but return 1 month later. Rivera also tells investigators about the money they were paid for services rendered.
Luis Rivera told them that the amount of money that he Sigfredo Garcia and Katie Magbanua were paid for this murder was $100,000 or more. Rivera claimed that he received around $35,000. He claimed that Sigfredo Garcia received around $40,000, and Katie Magbanua received the rest.
So police have to wonder who has the means to make that kind of payment. $100,000 is a lot of money.
In terms of where the money came from, that's where I think you get a lot of speculation from people. I don't know why it's speculation. It seems pretty obvious to me. If you have Mr. Rivera stating that he got the money from Katie, then I would point you to where Miss Magbanua got her money.
Getting Sigfredo Garcia or Catherine Magbanua to plead guilty and to cooperate is critical to the prosecution. If the prosecution wants to charge additional individuals beyond the people who've already been charged with this murder, they need to get another person essentially making claims of involvement of other people. Luis Rivera has said certain things to law enforcement about who was involved in this murder and why, but Luis Rivera is a career criminal, a member of the Latin Kings. He is serving almost 20 years for his crimes. He is somebody who defense lawyers could easily tar as an unreliable witness. The police critically need to get Sigfredo Garcia or Catherine Magbanua to testify against other alleged participants in this murder scheme if they want to charge anyone else with the murder of Dan Markel.
I don't have any sense that these people that have been arrested orchestrated the murder, that they had any real motive beyond somebody paying them. And if somebody paid them, one would like to see that person also be held responsible. There is a sense in which we're still waiting for another shoe to drop.
There's not a lot of punishment that's been meted out to anyone yet. Ironically, a big part of Danny's criminal law scholarship was about the philosophical idea of retribution as part of what the criminal justice process is for, kind of rebalancing the scales, and also communicating to the offenders that what you did was wrong, you need to account for it. We're very far from what Dan would have viewed as sufficient retribution for the things that have happened.
There's a lot of crime that is random, and you sort of accept that. And then there is crime that seems to have more to it. And this is the second kind. It doesn't make sense that these two guys would drive from South Florida twice, all the way to Tallahassee, to shoot this person in his driveway. Unless somebody talks and gives an explanation for why, that question isn't going to go away. The sense of closure is not just that someone has been punished, but that you have a sense of what happened. At some level, you want to know why this happened.
The wheels of justice turn slowly. This is a very complex case. It is a very high-profile case. It is a very important case. And cases like this take time. The state attorney's office obviously wants to make sure that it has all of its ducks in a row and that it has gathered the evidence it can use to make the strongest case possible. Sigfredo Garcia could possibly face the death penalty. Catherine Magbanua could possibly face life in prison. Their defense lawyers want to make sure they've gathered all of the evidence possible for them to gather to mount the strongest defense. It would not be surprising for a case of this nature to take a year or more to go from being charged to actually being put on trial. Defendants have a thing called speedy trial rights. You have a right under the Constitution to have a trial within a certain period of time. Sigfredo Garcia and Catherine Magbanua have waived their speedy trial rights, essentially saying, look, we're in no rush. As a result, there is no ticking clock running against this prosecution. It can move more slowly as a result.
3 years after Dan Markel's murder, one suspect has pled guilty and is cooperating with police. The other, along with Catherine Magbanua, has pled not guilty and will go forward with a trial.
When you look at this case, you have to wonder why the Adelsons have not been charged.
The people who are prosecuting it believe they need Miss Magbanua to flip in order to have this rock-solid evidence, obviously, against the Adelsons.
The case is strongest if you can get the current defendants to provide more evidence about how the events went down.
I believe the state attorney's office want to really make sure they have it right before they do anything, which I understand as a former prosecutor. But as a criminal defense lawyer, I've seen people indicted for first-degree murder on so much less.
After Dan's murder, Wendy did move with the boys to South Florida. And in addition to moving there, she also changed their last names from Markel to Adelson. She removed one of the child's middle names that was an homage to Dan's deceased grandmother. And to a lot of people, it just felt like she was really trying to erase all the traces of their father from their lives.
It's the belief of Dan Markel's friends and family and of the prosecution that we have not yet apprehended everyone that had a role in this homicide. And I don't think any one of us will rest until we feel like that's accomplished.
To date, since Dan died, the boys have not seen Dan's parents.
Think about what the Markels have been through. You got this evidence and these theories that we've heard floated. I would have to believe that as soon as these other suspects are arrested, that maybe these Markels will be able to see their grandchildren.
The thing that struck me in the early reporting is that Dan's friends instantly believed when he was killed that the divorce was to blame. And if this is proven for them, it will be terrible validation of that fear.
And as painful as these last weeks have been, my family and I find a measure of solace and comfort knowing that Danny lived and embraced life fully, and in turn was embraced so warmly by all of you. So we will remember and honor him. Danny, we miss you very much, and remember you in our hearts forever.
The search for justice in the Dan Markel murder case is ongoing. Sigfredo Garcia and Catherine Magbanua remain in custody. An unidentified third party is anonymously paying for Magbanua's legal fees.
Música. Tiffany Ballon tenía solo 18 años cuando desapareció en una cálida noche de verano. En 2015, mientras Tiffany había estado por todos los medios, la típica chica adolescente que había sido involucrado en algo extremadamente sospechoso y situaciones misteriosas en su final, horas años después, sus padres todavía trabajando para reconstruir qué es exactamente tuvo lugar la noche en que la hija desapareció. Tiffany se escapó de su casa esa noche y fue vista en imágenes de CCTV dirigiéndose hacia las cercanías vías del tren justo antes de la medianoche. Los investigadores localizaron una escena del crimen en las vías después de que se informó que el tren había atropellado a un peatón, pero eso era solo la punta del iceberg. Los detectives dictaminaron que Tiffany había tomado su propia vida esa noche, pero posterior las investigaciones pintan el fondo de Tiffany. Momentos bajo una luz muy diferente en el hecho de que mucha gente, incluyendo a la propia Tiffany, los padres ahora creen que Tiffany puede han sido emboscados en el bosque que noche y que el accidente del tren fue nada más que una portada inquietante. Música, historia. Tiffany Valiante había crecido en Mass Landing, Nueva Jersey. Asistió a la escuela secundaria Oakcrest, donde ella era conocido por ser un excelente jugador de voleibol. De hecho, él Voleibol era una de las principales vocaciones de Tiffany en la vida. Ella fue una de las mejores atletas en la escuela, tanto que después, al graduarse de la escuela secundaria, ella planeaba ir a la universidad gratis con un beca de voleibol para Mercy College en Nueva York, considerando que Tiffany era con una impresionante altura de 1,88 metros. Es evidente que ella habría sido una fuerza para hacerse tiene en cuenta en la cancha de voleibol, y los cazatalentos vieron su enorme potencial creciendo en más. Landing. Tiffany tenía una vida relativamente normal. Infancia hasta cierto punto. Laberinto. Aterrizaje. No es conocido por ser particularmente zona segura, y de hecho es una de las zonas menos seguras de todo Nueva Jersey. Pero por lo que puedo ver, ni Tiffany ni su familia tuvo nunca problemas importantes en la zona. Ahora, si este caso está comenzando para que te suene un poco familiar en este momento, es probable que se deba al caso de Tiffany. Se trató en la serie de Netflix Misterios sin resolver, específicamente el episodio titulado Misterio en el marcador de milla 45, pero la razón por la que quería cubrir esto en mi caso es porque Netflix lo hizo, en mi opinión, que cometieron algunos errores bastante serios. Con su cobertura de la historia, ellos se omitieron algunos detalles bastante importantes que en última instancia cambió todo el rumbo de la investigación y la historia. Ver para en su mayor parte, Netflix pintó Tiffany's. Su crianza fue bastante típica, y lo fue hasta cierto punto el área donde los escritores realmente fallaron en lo que respecta a los últimos 2 años de Tiffany's la vida en casi todos los relatos de esto. La historia de Tiffany a menudo es considerada como una estudiante modelo, una hija perfecta, chica inocente e intachable. Todo lo típico, cosas que se oyen después de que alguien se ha perdido su vida, y en realidad cuando miramos de vuelta a las personas que amamos y cuidamos, es muy fácil revisar todos los aspectos negativos y solo recuerdan a las personas por el impacto positivo que dejaron atrás. Y no me malinterpreten, Tiffany dejó un impacto positivo en casi todos los que sabía que muy pocas personas tenían algo. No tengo nada malo que decir de ella, pero eso no significa que no tuviera sus defectos. Uno de los aspectos clave de su vida, lo que a menudo se pasa por alto, es que, si bien la infancia de Tiffany fue bastante normal, hablando en serio, ciertamente tenía sus problemas. De hecho, en 2014 hectáreas sido informaron que los servicios de protección infantil había visitado la casa de la familia Valiente en al menos 3 veces. Parece que las visitas se produjeron después de que una de las Tiffany's, los profesores informaron de algunos problemas. Los moretones fueron entregados a las autoridades. Ahora Tiffany siempre estaba cubierto de pequeños moretones. Esa era la naturaleza de su carrera en el voleibol. Ella estaba destinada a lastimarse todo el tiempo. Pero según su maestra, los moretones no eran consistentes con práctica de voleibol y aparecieron como aunque Tiffany había estado siendo maltratada en casa. Cuando el CPS visitó el hogar familiar, descubrieron que su profesor, de hecho, tenía razón. La madre de Tiffany se sinceró sobre los problemas que habían sido lidiando con y admitió que golpeó a Tiffany en el brazo al menos una ocasión. Durante una discusión, ambos, Tiffany y su madre, fueron inscritas en terapia después de esta confesión, y los terapeutas creían que tenían dificultades desde simples problemas de comunicación y que tenían una situación estable. Por lo demás, relación. Ahora no sé tú, pero nunca he golpeado a un niño. Debido a problemas de comunicación, volverse enojado con sus hijos es natural para los niños. Las ideas y las creencias no siempre coinciden con el tuyo, pero cruzando la línea de abusar de un niño por una razón, el desacuerdo es algo completamente distinto. Ahora bien, ciertamente no estoy tratando de incitar a una bruja Juno, pintar a la madre de Tiffany como una persona mala o violenta. La verdad es el contexto lo es todo, y nosotros simplemente no conozco el contexto aquí en absoluto. En realidad, Tiffany medía 1,88 metros, una estatura muy grande. Niña, y puede haber golpeado a su madre primero y su madre volvió a comprar autodefensa o incluso por miedo. Realmente no tengo ni idea de lo que sucedió aquí. Pero claramente había problemas en casa y cuestiones que parecen haber sido a menudo pasado por alto durante la mayoría de los relatos de la historia de Tiffany, pero ahí no es donde está la historia realmente termina con Tiffany's. Los difíciles años de la adolescencia se ven en Netflix. El documental también mencionó un momento en el que Tiffany robó dinero de uno de sus amigas, específicamente ella le robó usé la tarjeta de crédito de mi amiga y gasté su dinero. Sin permiso ahora Netflix. El documental básicamente habló de esto hasta el final. Ni de lejos, según un funcionario civil. Transcripción de disposición que fue extraída. Según The Daily Beast, Tiffany había robado dinero de sus padres en lo que parece ha ocurrido en múltiples ocasiones en el pasado. La madre de Tiffany había defendido a Tiffany. Acciones relacionadas con el robo de dinero de su amiga, pero ella convenientemente omitió el hecho de que Tiffany tenía robada a su propia familia. Hace apenas unos meses antes de esto se ha sugerido que Tiffany hizo esto como una forma de desahogarse contra sus padres cuando ellos tenían desacuerdos, pero la verdad puede llegar mucho más lejos, más profundo que esto. Los niños roban por una variedad de razones por las que simplemente pueden robar porque alguien más tiene algo que ellos quieren, pero en el caso de Tiffany las acciones parecen haber sido su forma de comunicación. En particular, su familia afirma que ella le robaría a sus padres cuando ella estaba enfadada con ellos. Esto no hace más que demostrar la mayor problemas de comunicación que su familia estaba lidiando con. Muchas veces los niños roban para conseguir lo que sus padres necesitan. Llamar la atención para demostrar un punto o para traer conciencia de un problema subyacente en su vida en el hogar, incluso si todo está hecho subconscientemente. Ahora, ciertamente no soy un psicólogo infantil, pero estaría dispuesto a apuesto a que esto es lo que estaba sucediendo aquí. Tiffany estaba claramente pasando por dificultades y si se le cree a los investigadores esto puede haber sido lo que finalmente condujo a aquella terrible tarde de verano cuando Tiffany puso fin a sus problemas una vez y para todo. Música, era el 12 de julio de 2015. Tiffany y la familia estaba afuera celebrando el alto graduación escolar de su prima en alrededor de las 9:12 de la noche. De esa noche un amigo llamó a los padres de Tiffany y les dijo que temía a Tiffany puede que le haya robado dinero tomándola su tarjeta de débito y la compra de ropa y la comida. Este es el caso que yo mencionado hace apenas un momento con respecto al hábito de Tiffany de robar. Nunca se llamó a los investigadores y nunca se presentaron cargos. Pero obviamente los padres estaban muy al tanto de Tiffany's hábito. Más tarde esa noche un privado se llevó a cabo una investigación propia por los padres de Tiffany y ellos miraron a través de su habitación y encontró recibos que totalizó alrededor de $86 y si entiendo bien esta situación es correcta. Esta es la cantidad que la amiga reclamó Tiffany habían robado. Esto era toda la confirmación que la madre de Tiffany necesitaba saber que ella había estado tramando algo malo. Una vez más, apenas unos minutos después, Tiffany's la madre la confrontó sobre los crímenes que ella ha estado cometiendo. Tiffany obviamente no estaba contenta de escuchar eso. Su madre se había enterado de su secreto. Era una costumbre, pero la habían pillado con las manos en la masa. Según los investigadores, Tiffany finalmente se hartó de su madre. Quejas y abusos constantes desde el principio. Su madre abandonó la zona por un breve periodo. Momento en que Tiffany huyó de la casa y corrió lejos, pero este es solo uno de los muchos detalles inexplicables sobre Tiffany's desaparición. Repentina ver Tiffany tenía recientemente me diagnosticaron neofobia. O un miedo extremo a la oscuridad, sin embargo ella huyó hacia la oscuridad de la noche. Y no miré hacia atrás, esto fue increíble. Inusual y francamente bizarro el final. La imagen de Tiffany fue captada por una cámara de seguridad. Cámara en el patio de la familia. La cámara. Tiffany tomó una imagen de vigilancia. Saliendo de la propiedad aproximadamente 9:30 de la noche. En la foto se la puede ver vistiendo una camiseta y pantalones cortos, así como una diadema y un par de zapatos nuevos que acaba de comprar para la universidad. Después sus padres se dieron cuenta de que Tiffany tenía se escabulleron e hicieron todo lo posible por contactarla. Llamó varias veces, pero ella nunca respondió. Su teléfono. Sus padres no se comunicaron. Investigadores o presentar una denuncia por persona desaparecida. Caso inmediatamente. Como pensaron ella puede que solo necesitara tiempo para aclararse. Cabeza y ella volvería más tarde que por la noche, pero Tiffany nunca regresó a casa. El hecho de que esta imagen de CCTV fue la última vez que Tiffany alguna vez fuera vista con vida sería alrededor de las 11 de la noche. Que el padre de Tiffany abandonó el hogar y finalmente comenzó a buscarla. Esto fue aproximadamente 1 hora y media después de la discusión con su madre. Su padre ni siquiera llegó al final de la entrada de vehículos antes de que encontrara algo inquietante, una prueba que le produjo escalofríos. El teléfono celular de Tiffany se había caído la acera justo afuera de la casa y Tiffany no estaba por ningún lado. Según sus padres y la escena del crimen, los investigadores, Tiffany nunca fue en cualquier lugar sin su teléfono y el hecho de que ella lo dejó atrás le dijo padres que su desaparición fue lejos peor de lo que jamás hubieran imaginado. Tan solo 30 minutos después, los padres de Tiffany presentó un informe de persona desaparecida ante la investigadores del departamento de policía local. Me puse a trabajar muy rápido, pero desafortunadamente antes de una adecuada la investigación podría incluso comenzar de verdad. La policía tenía terribles noticias para ella. Padres detectives que estaban rastreando a través del bosque cercano encontraron varias pruebas desgarradoras que pintó un panorama muy sombrío de lo que había sucedido. Según la policía, esa noche ocurrió que tienen razones para creer que inmediatamente después de huir de la casa Tiffany había pasado por esos mismos bosques, pero extrañamente a lo largo de todos estos en el bosque encontraron varias piezas de la ropa de Tiffany y sus zapatos también eran encontrada, pero nadie sabe por qué ella se ha quitado los zapatos mientras corría a través de la espesa maleza. Así eso solo habría empeorado las cosas. Difícil para ella, pero como investigadores a continuación las piezas de evidencia todas a través del bosque rápidamente se dio cuenta de que toda la ropa había derecho a un conjunto de vías de tren y como tan pronto como llegaron a las vías los corazones se encogieron cuando encontraron a Tiffany. Pero ella ya no estaba vivo. Música. Eran aproximadamente las 11:03 de la tarde. Cuando un informe se le hizo a la policía local que el tren que pasaba por la zona había. Este informe fue que atropelló a un peatón. Llamó menos de 30 minutos antes. Los padres de Tiffany denunciaron su desaparición. En este punto no parece que los investigadores tenían alguna razón para creer que Tiffany había sido la que quedó impresionada el tren, pero cuando toda su ropa fue encontrado conduciendo a las vías del tren. La evidencia era clara, una enfermera que había estado cerca llegaron a Tiffany Saba 23:16, pero ya era demasiado tarde. Fue temprano en la mañana siguiente cuando los padres de Tiffany recibieron la noticia que hizo que su mundo se derrumbara a su alrededor, pero para colmo, las cosas empeoran. Menos de 24 horas después, la policía explicaron que creían que Tiffany se hizo esto a sí misma. Esto llegó como una conmoción para los padres de Tiffany porque según su madre, Tiffany no era deprimida y ciertamente no lo había hecho. Planeó quitarse la vida, pero tenemos tener en cuenta a Tiffany y a su madre. Tenían problemas de comunicación muy claros y Tiffany obviamente estaba pasando por un momento difícil. Mucho en los meses previos a su desaparición. Por lo que es totalmente posible que su madre simplemente no reconoció las señales o Tiffany no se comunicaron ellos de una manera que su madre pudo. Para entender, pero también hay otra, existe una clara posibilidad aquí. Tiffany no lo hizo, alguien se hizo esto a sí misma, la llevó a través del bosque esa noche y le arrebató la vida, y esta teoría no es tan descabellado como podrías pensar. Cree ver, según Tiffany's padres, la investigación sobre ella. La desaparición fue un fracaso desde el principio. Lamentablemente, ya que el crimen ocurrió en un conjunto de vías férreas, la policía de Jersey Transit fue la que encargado de llevar a cabo la investigación. La policía de tránsito no está debidamente equipado y puede que no tenga, incluso han sido entrenados para cometer homicidios. Las investigaciones son su pan de cada día, simplemente investigando delitos de tránsito, está en el nombre, pero considerando el lugar del crimen, el condado, la oficina del sheriff estaba severamente limitada en lo que pudieron hacer en términos de investigación, según Unsolved Misterios, que la policía de tránsito hizo pésimo trabajo asegurando la escena del crimen, que genera montañas de evidencia, ya sea por haber sido mal manejados o mal almacenados o pasado completamente por alto, pero sin resolver los misterios en sí mismos. En realidad se saltaron fuera de una pieza increíblemente vital de información que ha sido compartida por New.com. Según este informe, los investigadores recuperaron un hacha en la escena del crimen. No solo esto, sino el hacha está listada y está cubierta de rojo. Ahora bien, aquí se afirma la suposición obvia. Es que esta hacha puede haber estado cubierta en la sangre de la familia de Tiffany. Se cree que probablemente este sea también el caso. Pero hay un gran problema aquí. Mientras que esto se mencionó el hacha durante la investigación y fue recopilado como parte de la investigación sobre Tiffany, al pasar se perdió antes de que pudiera siquiera ser procesado. Todo lo que quedaba eran descripciones vagas del arma, pero el arma en sí ha desaparecido desde entonces debido al mal manejo de la investigación realizada por New Jersey Transit. La policía cree firmemente que la familia de Tiffany que este hacha puede contener las respuestas a qué le pasó a Tiffany ese día. Hasta que se recupere, esas respuestas serán. En realidad, este hacha permanece desconocida. Puede que no tuviera ninguna relación con la desaparición de Tiffany, pero no tenemos ninguna información. Una forma de demostrar esto de una manera u otra, pero eso es solo la punta del iceberg, y hay otra pieza vital de evidencia que podría cambiar todo. Cuando los detectives llegaron al lugar de los hechos del crimen para recoger los restos de Tiffany y procesarla por cualquier adicional evidencia, que notaron algo muy específico, detalle que no tenía sentido si recuerda que los zapatos de Tiffany fueron encontrados en el bosque que rodea las vías del tren. Sabemos que ella correría una distancia considerable a través del bosque antes de finalmente dirigirse a las huellas. Sin embargo, sus pies no mostraban signos de corriendo a través de la maleza, a través de las espinas y las ramas del árbol que obviamente han sido esparcidos por todas partes en el bosque. Sus pies eran totalmente suaves y libre de cualquier abrasión. Según un informe, Tiffany habría corrido casi una milla completa sin sus zapatos. Así que esto no tenía ningún sentido. Casi todo la ropa de Tiffany fue recuperada en ese día, el bosque, incluyendo su diadema y la camisa que había estado usando en imágenes de CCTV. Pero los investigadores también encontraron un llavero que los padres de Tiffany no reconoció. Ahora es posible que este llavero ya estaba en el bosque y no estaba relacionado con el caso, pero cuando usted considera el llavero en combinación con el resto de la evidencia que tenemos, que preguntémonos si Tiffany realmente huyó a través del bosque esa tarde o fue ella llevaba y podía. Este llavero pertenece a la persona que la llevó, considerando que su ropa ha sido sus pies eran suaves como los de un bebé y supuestamente no mostró signos de depresión. Bueno, todo esto en combinación con el hacha que se encontró cerca ha llevado a muchas personas a creer que Tiffany pudo haber sido secuestrada esta noche. Esto también explicaría por qué el teléfono se había caído Al fondo de ahora el camino de entrada de la familia para aclarar algo que mencioné anteriormente en el momentos antes de que Tiffany supuestamente saliera corriendo esa noche, su madre la había estado presionando sobre el crédito. Tarjeta que había robado de uno de sus amigos según la madre de Tiffany. Tanto ella como Tiffany salieron al coche de Tiffany para buscar el crédito. La tarjeta Tiffany le dijo a su madre que la tarjeta no estaba en el coche porque ella no fue él quien lo robó, sino ella. La madre insistió en que lo revisaran de todos modos, creyendo firmemente que Tiffany estaba mintiendo. Mientras registraban el coche, la madre de Tiffany afirma haberla visto. La hija agarra en secreto una tarjeta y la desliza. Se lo guardó en el bolsillo trasero, escondiéndolo de la vista cuando su madre la presionó. Sobre esto, Tiffany lo negó una vez más. Fue entonces cuando su madre volvió a entrar la casa para contarle a su padre sobre la situación y cuando regresó afuera, Tiffany se había ido, era todo lo que quedaba. Detrás se veían las imágenes de las cámaras de seguridad de Tiffany caminando por el patio hacia el final del camino de entrada, teniendo esto en cuenta considerando que no había testigos del momento exacto en que Tiffany se fue a la casa de la familia. Tenemos que al menos considerar la idea de que Tiffany no abandonar la propiedad de su familia por sí misma. Acuerdo ese día si la imagen de CCTV la capturaron caminando directamente hacia él al final del camino de entrada, pero ¿quién puede tener estado esperando al final de ese camino de entrada? Que desconocemos por completo quién podría haber estado acechando detrás de un árbol o un arbusto. El hecho de que Tiffany la dejó caer teléfono celular al final del camino de entrada esa noche simplemente no me sienta bien. Y el hecho de que la despojaron de casi toda su ropa, pero no tiene un solo rasguño en sus pies, es simplemente sospechoso. Cuando combinas esto con el hacha y el llavero, bien ahora no pinta un panorama agradable. Existe una clara posibilidad de que Tiffany se hizo esto a sí misma y al hacha, el teléfono celular, el llavero y la falta. Los cortes en sus pies son todos simples. Las coincidencias son una posibilidad. Pero dedicarle a este caso siquiera 2 segundos completos. Mi pensamiento me lleva a creer que algo mucho más siniestro tuvo lugar en esos bosques esa tarde y yo no creo que Tiffany se haya hecho esto a sí misma. Por un momento no he podido confirmar si el tránsito o no. La policía sigue investigando el caso de Tiffany's caso, pero su familia ciertamente lo está haciendo todo lo que puedan para mantener las cosas. Mudarse allí ha sido varias novedades y nuevas pruebas que han salido a lo largo de los años, pero nada ha dado lugar a arrestos o garantías, y considerando el tránsito la policía cree que ella misma se lo hizo. Arrestos o comienzan a aparecer cada vez es más improbable a menos que algo sucesos importantes como el AF. Los actos antes mencionados son ser gordo. Por lo que puedo decir, está claro. El caso de Tiffany se considera resuelto. Pero el rastro de evidencia que quedó ha dejado a mucha gente preguntándose: ¿qué le sucedió realmente a Tiffany Valiante? Gracias chicos por sintonizar otro episodio de Historias de Crímenes Reales. ¿Y tú? ¿Me gustó este video? Mira este otro. Un caso interesante que cubrí y no olvides suscribirte, es totalmente gratis. Y te mantiene al tanto de todo mi. En futuros videos también puedes hacer clic aquí. Haz clic en el botón de abajo para apoyar el canal y ver nuevos videos mucho antes que todos. Nadie más lo hace, pero mi nombre es Takeanas y yo. Nos vemos en el próximo.